Houston, Texas, August 1965. The heat pressed down on the city like a held breath. Ceiling fans spun lazily in small apartments, pushing warm air in slow circles. In one quiet complex, nothing seemed out of place. No broken windows, no raised voices, no reason to call the police. Until someone opened the refrigerator. The smell came first. Sharp, sweet, wrong. Inside the icebox, wrapped carefully as if meant to be preserved, lay what no one was prepared to see. Human remains, placed with a disturbing calm, hidden in the most ordinary place in a home. The apartment belonged to Fred and Edwina Rogers, a quiet, middle-aged couple known for keeping to themselves. Neighbors described them as polite, unremarkable, invisible. Now their home was suddenly the center of something unspeakable. Police arrived quickly, the shock plain on their faces. The apartment showed no signs of struggle. Furniture stood where it belonged. The door had not been forced. Whoever did this had been invited inside, or never needed permission at all. As investigators searched the rooms, more questions surfaced. The rest of the bodies were not immediately found. Blood was minimal. The precision suggested planning, time taken, steps followed, no panic. This was not a crime committed in anger. This was something colder. Attention turned to one person almost immediately. The couple's adult son. He had vanished. His car was gone. His belongings were missing. And according to neighbors, he had been seen arguing with his parents not long before they disappeared. To the police, it felt like the beginning of an easy answer. But easy answers rarely belong to cases like this. Outside, reporters gathered. Inside, detectives stared at the open refrigerator, trying to reconcile the normalcy of the kitchen with the horror it contained. Because someone had lived here, cooked here, gone to sleep knowing what waited behind that door. And whoever it was had walked away into the Houston heat, leaving behind a crime that would refuse to stay simple. The name came easily. Charles Rogers. The missing son. The last person known to have seen Fred and Edwina alive. To the police, it felt almost too convenient, the kind of lead detectives hope for when a crime defies explanation. But convenience is not the same as truth. Charles Rogers was not a stranger drifting through Houston. He was educated, intelligent, quiet to the point of discomfort. A geophysicist who had once worked for oil companies, now unemployed, living with his parents well into adulthood. Neighbors remembered him as polite but distant, a man who avoided eye contact, who spoke little, who seemed permanently elsewhere. And now he was gone. Inside the apartment, detectives noted details that unsettled them. The refrigerator was clean, too clean. The remains inside had been carefully wrapped in plastic. This was not a hurried attempt to hide evidence. It was methodical, almost respectful in its precision. Even more disturbing was what they didn't find. No murder weapon, no fingerprints out of place, no sign of forced entry. The scene felt staged or controlled. Police searched for Charles across the city. His car was found abandoned near the Houston Ship Channel. Inside, maps, strange notes, personal items. Nothing that explained where he had gone or why. The theory formed quickly. Charles snapped, killed his parents, fled. Case closed. Almost. Except one question refused to go away.
How does one man dismember two bodies, clean an apartment, and disappear without a trace? No witnesses, no financial trail, no confirmed sightings, just absence. As the investigation deepened, some officers began to hesitate. Charles Rogers had no history of violence, no record, no known motive strong enough to explain such brutality. And yet everything pointed toward him, not because of evidence, but because there was no one else. Sometimes a missing person becomes a suspect simply by being missing. Houston watched as the story took shape in headlines. Son wanted in Icebox Murders. But beneath the certainty, doubt was growing. Because the case was beginning to feel less like a solved crime and more like a question no one wanted to ask too loudly. What if Charles Rogers wasn't the killer? And if he wasn't, then who walked out of that apartment alive?
As days turned into weeks, the search for Charles Rogers expanded far beyond Houston. His name was entered into national databases. His photograph circulated through police departments and border checkpoints. Agents followed rumors from bus stations, seaports, and remote oil towns. Anywhere a man could vanish and start over. But Charles Rogers never appeared. Not once. Inside the Rogers apartment, the mystery deepened. Investigators re-examined the scene with fresh eyes, and what they saw didn't sit right. Blood spatter was minimal. The cleanup had been thorough, almost professional. Whoever had done this knew how to work slowly and how to avoid mistakes. This wasn't panic. This was patience. Then came the whispers. Some neighbors recalled unfamiliar visitors, men they couldn't describe clearly, only that they seemed out of place. Others mentioned that Charles had once spoken cryptically about being in danger, about knowing things he shouldn't. One report claimed he feared his parents. Another suggested he feared someone else entirely. The stories conflicted, but they shared one unsettling thread. Charles may not have been hiding. He may have been running. Police considered darker possibilities. There were rumors of government connections, of Charles's past work in geophysics, intersecting with sensitive oil and mapping projects. Some speculated about intelligence agencies, classified knowledge, enemies that never make the news. No proof, only theories. What complicated matters further was the timeline. Forensic estimates suggested the murders may have occurred days before the remains were discovered. That meant someone had lived in the apartment after the killings, sleeping, cooking, going about daily life with the refrigerator holding the truth. If it was Charles, why stay? And if it wasn't, why take the risk? The media pressed harder. Headlines grew sharper. Public opinion hardened. To most, the case was already solved. A disturbed son kills his parents and disappears. But among investigators, certainty was cracking. Because the deeper they looked, the more the crime seemed too controlled, too clean, too deliberate for a crime of sudden rage. And the silence surrounding Charles Rogers was no longer just suspicious. It was terrifying. As months passed, the case began to rot from the inside. Leads dried up. Sightings collapsed under scrutiny. Every trail connected to Charles Rogers ended the same way. Nowhere. No bank activity, no confirmed travel records, no letters, no calls. It was as if he had stepped out of the world. Investigators shifted focus from the manhunt to the mind behind the crime. Psychologists studied Charles's background closely. He was intelligent, reserved, socially distant, a man who lived in the same apartment as his parents well into adulthood, yet remained emotionally isolated from them. Neighbors described constant tension inside the home, arguments behind closed doors, long silences afterward. Nothing explosive, just pressure. But there was a problem. Nothing in Charles's past suggested violence of this scale. Dismemberment requires time, control, emotional detachment. This was not a moment of rage, it was a process, one that demanded planning, precision, and the ability to compartmentalize horror. The profiler's conclusion was chilling. Whoever did this had practiced emotional separation long before the murders. Alternative theories resurfaced. Some investigators believe Charles may have discovered something dangerous, something involving his parents, financial secrets, criminal connections, or knowledge that made him a liability. Others suggested a third party entirely, someone who killed the parents and forced Charles to disappear, willingly or not. Again, no proof, only questions that multiplied with every attempt to answer them. Then came the quiet decisions. Evidence storage protocols changed. Files were archived. The case was quietly downgraded from active investigation to unresolved homicide. Not solved, not closed, just set aside. Years passed. Houston changed. The apartment building was renovated. New families moved in, unaware of what had once been hidden behind refrigerator doors. But Charles Rogers never returned. No death certificate, no arrest, no body. The Icebox murders became something worse than an unsolved crime. They became a warning. Because in this case, the mystery wasn't just who killed Charles and Frida Rogers. It was how someone could erase themselves so completely after committing one of the most disturbing crimes in American history. And if Charles Rogers was still alive, that meant the story wasn't over.
Time did what it always does. It buried the noise. But it never buried the questions. Decades after the Icebox murders, the case still haunted Houston like a half-remembered nightmare. True crime writers reopened the files. Amateur investigators mapped timelines. Psychologists argued over motives that could never be proven. Every theory circled back to the same name, Charles Rogers. And every theory broke apart in the same place, because there was still no evidence that he was alive, and no evidence that he was dead. One detail continued to disturb investigators more than any other. Charles's passport was never found, not in the apartment, not in the rubble after renovation, not in government records. If he fled, he did so quietly. No confirmed sightings, no fingerprints, no paper trail. A vanishing act so complete it suggested planning long before the murders ever happened. Which raised the darkest possibility of all. What if the Icebox murders were not the beginning, but the end of a plan already in motion? The crime itself offered no closure. The bodies were never fully recovered. No funeral, no grave, just fragments cataloged in evidence rooms and medical reports. Fred Rogers's hands were never found, a detail investigators never stopped questioning. Hands hold answers, fingerprints, defense wounds, truth. Someone made sure those answers disappeared forever. Over time, the case transformed into something larger than a single crime. It became a symbol of everything that can go wrong when violence meets silence, when a family implodes behind closed doors and no one looks closely enough until it's too late. No neighbors intervened,
No authorities were alerted before the murders. No warning signs were taken seriously. Just a quiet household until it wasn't. Today, the Icebox murders remain officially unsolved. No charges, no convictions, no ending. Only an open file and a question that refuses to fade. Can someone commit the perfect disappearance after committing the perfect crime? If Charles Rogers lived, he carried the secret to his grave. If he died, he took it with him. Either way, the truth vanished with him. And the refrigerator doors once opened in horror were closed forever. Some crimes end with justice, others end with silence. The Icebox murders belong to the second kind, and that may be the most unsettling ending of all.